What's happening? What's going on?
Waiting for YouTube to start.
Okay. And then you're also doing Facebook?
I guess. But I picked a video game, which I don't know what that means. I don't know why I would care if we're playing a video game. So the notification from YouTube just came through. Let me post it over. Waiting for YouTube to start. Okay. We're live.
Hey, we're live, everybody. How's it going? Let's see. We're going to talk about some music tonight. I don't know if people are familiar, but that's what we do. I got my water. How's everybody doing in their bunkers? Remember, your urine can be recycled. Okay. So, let's see. Got that. I'm going to hit the record button. And we're going to get this mofo on the road. You ready?
Yep.
And 3, 2, 1. Jay, we're back again with another episode thanks to our Dig Me Out Union on Patreon. You can help us make the next episode happen by joining us at dmounion.com or digmeoutunion.com. Jay,
Tim.
it's the first episode of April after the month of March, which seemed to last 7 years. It was the longest March in recorded history. Now we're into April, which means we have a new poll from our patron suggestions or our website suggestions that our patrons vote on. And this time, not only did we have one poll, we had a tie, so then we had a second poll, which is fun.
It happens.
It does. So let's go back to our original poll, Jay. These were the options in our original poll over at Patreon. New Radiant Storm King, Hurricane Necklace, Nancy Boy's self-titled album, Face to Face, Ignorance is Bliss, Boards of Canada, Music Has the Right to Children, The Wedding Presents, Sea Monsters, Something for Kate, Beautiful Sharks, The Cranes, Wings of Joy, and Tree People, Guilt, Regret, Embarrassment. That is a very diverse and interesting poll because there's really not a well-known band in that list. And sometimes we get like an Elliott Smith or a, previous polls that have like one dominant, like well-known band, even though they might not win, there's usually like one. But really, like Face to Face might be the most well-known band amongst that list.
Mm-hmm.
However, that's not how the voting went down. The vote ended up being a tie between Boards of Canada and Something for Kate. Boards of Canada suggested by Philip Kustos and Something for Kate by Philip Hawkins. So then it went to the all-important tiebreaker, and by a score of 54% to 46%, and this was a down-to-the-wire vote, Boards of Canada, Music Has the Right to Children, won our runoff. And that's what we're going to talk about on this episode, Jay. Were you familiar with Boards of Canada?
I remember the name. It's one of those names though you have, and the album cover doesn't help you, where you just have no idea what this band is going to be about. Like it could be anything.
Right. Yeah, I think I got them mixed up with Godspeed You Black Emperor.
Yeah, that's funny. Yep, I could see that.
It was one of those like long names that I was like, I don't know what this is, but maybe it's in this genre. I don't know. So let's go to our. I didn't really listen to much of this band. I heard the name like you, but I didn't really know much. So let's go to the comments on this. Scott Scott Holgram, I believe, said that Something for Kate font is the worst, so Boards of Canada gets my vote.
Okay.
He's a font fanatic. Whitney Biller said, I know someone named Kate and sharks are cool, so Something for Kate gets my vote. Clearly, we're using the highest level of criteria to make these decisions.
Right.
Thank you, Scott, Whitney. Steve Musitsky said, oh man, I just tied it, but I got to hold my ground here. We simply can't have 2 Something for Kate albums and 0 Boards of Canada. Come on, people. And then Patrick Testa said, I gotcha. And he was the one who pushed the vote over to Boards of Canada. Arlene Moreau said Something for Kate has a new single out April 2nd. Having you cover one of their albums in April would be great. Sadly, we're not, but we're going to mention that Something for Kate has a new single out. Also, we've covered them before. Many years ago, we did a Something for Kate album, so you can go into the archives and dig that one out if you want to listen to us talk about something. Bleh. If you want to listen to us talk about Something for Kate, Something for Kate. That's a hard sentence to get out. Frank Garcia Hell, I love that Boards of Canada album, but I've somehow never heard Something for Kate. I just checked it out on Spotify, and I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on that album. Strangely, I've never come across the band. To which I said, strangely, I've never come across the band is our motto.
Yeah. That's kind of why we're here.
Yeah. We also got comments from the original poll from Jason Pan, Andrew O.C., Ian Wobble, Davey Bright, Darren Leach. I'm not going to get into all of them, or else we'll be here for a while. But thanks, everybody, for commenting. We also need to mention that we have 2 new patrons.
We do. That's so
cool.
We do.
Lars and Richard, thank you both for joining us at the $2 level. We greatly appreciate your support. We know, in these times, you could be spending your entertainment dollars anywhere. So we appreciate you supporting the podcast. We'll have stickers going out to you soon for your sticker collection. We should do a Dig Me Out sticker book, Jay, so people can collect the different stickers.
Oh, yeah.
Put it in their book.
I used to have a sticker book. Did you?
Oh, yes. I love the Scratch and Stiff. Yeah. Those were my favorite stickers.
I love
Or the ones that you get like 6 of them and they form a picture.
I used to love the baseball and football sticker books. Did you ever do those?
Yep. Oh, yeah.
I love those.
Oh, yes. That's how I knew about anything going on in baseball.
Yeah.
I knew every player because I had stickers.
Right.
Or hunting stickers. So let's talk a little bit about Boards for Canada, or Boards of Canada. Not from Canada. That's the first thing you should know. No, Edinburgh, Scotland. It's 2 brothers, Michael Sanderson and Michael Eon Sanderson. So here's the thing. They were born in Scotland, but for a couple years, their dad worked construction in Calgary building the Saddle Dome. And that's how they have a connection to Canada. They both attended the University of Edinburgh, where Michael studied music and Marcus studied artificial intelligence. However, Marcus dropped out before completing his degree. They all have a musical family, and they have been recording on various types of devices since the 80s, just doing little recording projects for fun.
Mm-hmm.
And in 1995, they made their first actual recording called Twoism. It was an EP. And then they released a second EP in 1986 called High Scores. That followed with Music Has the Right to Children, which is their debut album. It was released on, well, depending on which country you're in, Warp Records or Scam Records or Matador Records. Produced by Marcus and Michael. And very highly regarded when it came out. AllMusic called it a landmark album for electronic music. It got 8 out of 10 in Spin. It got 10 out of 10 from Pitchfork. NME at 8 out of 10. So this is, and it's in Pitchfork's top 100 albums of the 90s. Not just electronic, but just albums of the 90s. Mojo's 100 Classics albums. And it's on the list of, there's a book called 1001 Albums You Must Hear Before You Die. And it's included in that book as well. So, even though you and I were not familiar, this does have a legacy, I guess you'd say. And so the band has actually gone on, the brothers have released albums into the 2000s, 2002, 2005, and 2013. They released records, and then they've had EPs out, 99, 2000, 2006. And they had a 2000, Warp Records released in anniversary of their 30th anniversary. They did a, what was this? Oh, they did an online takeover of the radio station, and they did a 2-hour mixtape from Boards of Canada, which I guess the band has sort of been, on hiatus. So that was sort of a big deal that they did this mixtape for the 30th anniversary of Warp Records. Anyway, let's get into the record, Jay.
Let's do it.
Tell me one thing you liked about Music Has the Right to Children by Boards of Canada.
I want to flip it around on you. I want you to go first because I think you're going to be more comfortable with this genre and probably give me something to work with.
Sure. Listening to this, one thing that I liked is, and there's more than one thing, but the 90s are known for, when it comes to electronic music, either like up-tempo electronica in the vein of Prodigy or Chemical Brothers, stuff like that, or like the trip hop of Massive Attack, Tricky, Portishead. Those are like the two big ones that are really established in the 90s. You can see there's electronic music that was like industrial, that was already existing when it came into the 90s, like Ministry and Nine Inch Nails and stuff like that. But to me, those are two genres that exist sort of specifically to the 90s, like the way that like Britpop does. Mm-hmm. So what's interesting is hearing a band that is a little bit outside of both of those. There are some trip hop elements to this band, but they're much more in the vein of like what I would describe as down tempo, which if you're listening to, it's sort of in the vein of trip hop, but it tends to have like a bit of a lounge feel, almost like a chill feel. Whereas I think of trip hop as having a little bit more menace in the music. When I think of like Tricky and Massive Attack, like that's music that has like an edge to it, tends to be more like minor driven, I think. And I don't think that down tempo and chill and that kind of stuff works in that same way. Also, there's a little bit of like psychedelic aspect to this. So the vibe of this record overall works for me. I like instrumental electronic music. I like to put it on, especially when I'm working. So I can put this record on and just listen to it over and over again. And but I also, because I like to fool around with making music of this style, I find it inspirational. Knowing that they were using a lot of like analog equipment to do this, based on what I was reading, a lot of it is vintage synthesizers, old analog tapes. It's not a lot of computers. It's them cutting stuff up and doing it in a very old school way to put it all together. There's even some like field recordings where they would go out and just like capture the sounds of things and then loop them and create, and then affect those sounds. It hits me in the same way that like listening to the first couple Portishead records, where it sounds like music I'm familiar with, but when I actually like drill down and like really focus on it, they're taking things that are really unusual and creating this soundscape. So what it works for me is the overall like I guess, presentation in terms of it works as a full album, start to finish. I like the vibe. I like the way that they build this record from the opening track. It reminded me a little bit of the Uncle records that James Lavelle does, where it's a little bit like I don't want. It's not concept-y record. It's not a concept record, but there's definitely like a vibe that follows through the whole record. So it's weird to talk about a record that is, so not lyrical driven.
Right.
We're usually, focusing on melody in a lot of ways as driving the songs.
Right.
And I think about this when I listen to like, like Vangelis or something, like those 70s or Tangerine Dream or, soundtracks of John Carpenter movies. You know what I mean? Like that's the mindset I have to be in to like listen to this, where you're listening to like, it's a purely like emotional response. Like you just either get the music and you like it, or you're bored within like 2 minutes of hearing it. So, and I've never been, a huge electronic fan. I don't own that many records, but I do like listening to it as far as certain situations, which is like working and writing and stuff like that. But I wouldn't, this is not something I'm going to put on like Saturday morning on a record and listen to it. Like it's not that right vibe for me. So that's how I guess that's what works for me, is the overall presentation, the way it sounds, it's hard to put a finger on it.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, you hit on I think what worked for this for me, which doesn't. Not a huge electronic music fan, but I think I enjoyed this more than a lot of the other bands or groups that you mentioned and albums you mentioned, because the use of the analog equipment and just an overall, like, even the soundscapes they use, which usually annoy me, I think conceptually here work because they bring this ambient kind of human environmental thing. Like you feel as you're listening to the music, which is, it's somewhat analog in that, like the electronics are more analog driven, but for the most part it's electronic. The ambient stuff and the field recordings bring this like almost like there's a party going on, or just this casual gathering of people sometimes,
Yeah.
that you're in the middle of, and it just creates this environment that's inherently human, which is natural, which is, I think, a good contrast to try to continue to give this a theme and have it be cohesive, despite some of the stuff that's clearly electronic. I'm a fan of analog synth, so there's some great analog synth sounds on here. The Stranger Things soundtrack probably primed me for this a little bit. Like if I would have heard this at the time, maybe I wouldn't have enjoyed it as much as I do now, having listened to that quite a bit. So I also like, there's a couple songs on here where melodically what's going on is they'll create these little lines and patterns using synth lead tones or electric piano tones or what have you. And the thing I like about them is that there's a randomness to them. Mm-hmm. So they repeat in some way, and you can kind of get a hook and a melody formed fairly quickly, but there's something about the way it's performed and maybe processed that gives it this random feel, like it just changes a little bit with every repetition. And I love that idea. I think that is one of my favorite things about the record. And then they, when it works well, like I think Roy G. Biv is an example where
mm-hmm.
it starts to layer, and there is I think another thing that makes this interesting is there's a unique relationship between the bass lines, the drums, and that lead part, so that it's not always like, even the bass and drums aren't always completely locked up. There'll be a bass line established that's kind of its own cool little dark sounding thing, but then the drums will be not, they'll be a little off of that. Like, yeah, they'll lock up on the one or whatever, or the bass, the drums will play a triplet and the bass line will lock up, but like it'll ring out. And like there's this contrast between either like the bass notes ringing out or the drums being like the pattern being longer. So you get this space that I don't always hear in electronic music, where it tends to be a lot like tighter and more compressed. There's like this space created just between the way they handle the drums and the bass. And then over top of that, they can kind of do anything, like with these repeating little melodies that kind of change and evolve and layer or appear a little bit random, and then they can kind of bring in the ambient piece to thread in the sort of fill out the space. So when it works well for me, there's this really cool combination of those things going on, and just musically it's put together in a way that's it has variety. It builds. There's some little interludes that aren't overdone. They're just nice little one or 2 minute things that kind of stitch songs together, which are nice. So when they hit that, I think it works really well, and they really take advantage of the analog synth stuff. I'm a big fan of that. So those are some of the things that tend to work for me.
Yeah, you mentioned Roy G. Biv. The other one that's like a highlight for me is Turquoise Hexagon Sun. It's got that like a little electric piano sounding lead, and it's just like you said, it's just this right level of chill that it's never overpowering. This could easily they could have easily gone in a different direction with some of the stuff where it could have you could have used some harsher tones and made it more abrasive.
Yeah.
But for the most part, it is very consistent in terms of whatever instrument they're using. They're always tending to stay pretty, like, I guess, if you're thinking in terms of a keyboard, everything tends to be like down the middle. Like everything is like middle C area.
Yeah.
Whereas there's not a lot of high, and obviously there's bass notes and stuff like that, but it doesn't get like, there's no like big sub bass stuff going on.
Right.
No, like everything is the right tone for, if you were to pick out, the longer tracks that are just instrumental, that don't have any like vocal samples, you could kind of create a little playlist to just have it playing at your cocktail party sort of thing, and it would work. I think it's pretty cool that, and I had to read about it, is just how much of this was just, built from the ground up, which sort of reminded me of what band was it that? Oh, it was the Dubs. Like they were an electronic band, and then everything like burned in a fire, and they had to redo their band. And then they formed the Dubs. Like the Dubs were going to be like supposed to be an electronic band,
right?
And then they basically formed a completely new band because all their stuff was ruined. Like they had all this equipment and loops and everything, and it was just gone. So they're like, we're not going to try to recreate that,
right?
So, and then the Dubs were born, and it's interesting to see like, a band take a genre that can be pretty stale, and electronic music, you can push a button on a keyboard and get a loop built for you.
Right. And I'm hypersensitive to that.
Right. And that's pretty easy to do.
Yeah.
So when it's done really poorly, you can hear it. Whereas here you can hear like they put a lot of time into constructing these, longer tracks that have some variation throughout them. They tend to, go through a little bit of a transformation, and then these shorter like interludes that are sprinkled throughout the record, because it's a longer record. It's like 61 minutes. Actually, it's 71 minutes.
Right. Hour 11 minutes. Yep.
Yeah, and
18 songs.
yeah. So, and it's not a Guided by Voices record,
Right.
or else if it would be 18 songs and it'd be 23 minutes.
Right.
So, so it's interesting to hear like the complete opposite end of there's nothing stock that I hear. Like everything you can hear is sort of manufactured from their collection of whatever they're using, reel-to-reel tapes and old synthesizers, and like you said, like hearing that Stranger Things soundtrack is a good gateway for people who have not listened to a lot of electronic music or synthesizer music, because it draws on so much from the past but also sounds contemporary. Like it gives you a hint of nostalgia, even though they're using like modern keyboards and stuff like that to do all that.
Right.
There's actually a good video. You can go on to YouTube, and there's a video of them explaining how they wrote the theme to Stranger Things, and like what that keyboard is, and how they use a filter to, when you listen to it, you hear the rise of the one particular arpeggio loop.
Yeah.
And it's all it is one note, but then they're using a filter envelope to open that up and then close it back down. So it's a much different way when you think about making music. It's not a matter of proficiency in terms of how many notes you can play. It's a proficiency of how can you manipulate what you're doing with regards to effects and understanding how frequencies work and how to manipulate them. So there's a different skill set involved, which I think interesting.
I think that's why I respond so much more to the analog synth realm, is because you're truly treating it as an instrument, because you're starting with tones, primal tones, and then you're understanding like how to manipulate them in the same way that you would if you were playing a piano, like the intensity and the vibrato and all those elements from an acoustic instrument you're able to bring to analog synth, which just I don't know, I just respond more to that. It just feels more musical. I also liked, I mean, to go back to the point you were talking about it kind of creates this, they do a really good job of maintaining a mood and a vibe that has a certain level of intensity to it. And even with the drums, like even though they're using drum machines, like the intensity, like because with drum machines you can change the velocity, so it sounds like somebody's playing more aggressively or less aggressively,
right?
Like how, like it's trying to mimic how hard you would hit a drum. They've even tuned all that. You can tell like they're not, because they're not using loops or samples, like they're creating their own beds from the ground up. They're able to like do it in a way where it's all consistent and it matches the vibe, which I really appreciated. So the stuff that's mellow, like the feel of the drums is mellow, even though it's not a real drummer. Like tonally it sounds right, like nothing sounds too intense or like out of left field and kind of tacked on. So I appreciate that as well.
I'll say, let's get into what didn't work.
Yep.
There's a couple tracks where they have vocal samples.
Yep.
And I learned some of those vocal samples are from Sesame Street.
The counting one.
Yeah. So that like on Aquarius.
Yeah.
That didn't necessarily work as well for me.
Right.
I could have completely ignored or had a record with no vocal samples. I did think on which song is it? Is it Teleplastic Workshop? The way they manipulate the vocal in that song is kind of cool. Where they're like chopping it off, like that's clearly like a vocal that is being manipulated.
Uh-huh.
And I thought that was a cooler approach than just having a person having their vocal repeated over and over again, like on Aquarius. Even though it gets a little repetitive.
Yeah.
because it's like 6.5 minutes. But I thought it was an interesting way. But I didn't love the vocals, just in terms of the vibe of the record.
Yep. Is this does this record have the least amount of vocals we've ever reviewed? I'm trying to think of something else top of mind.
That Null record didn't have any vocals.
Oh, that's true.
That might be the only one.
Yeah, no, I think the samples get old. The vocal, whatever you want to call it, they get old fast too.
Yeah.
You know, how many times, like, musically I could listen to this over and over again, but anytime you hear the voices, it starts to get, and it's not musical, it gets kind of annoying to me.
Yeah.
So I'm with you there. I don't think it added a ton to the songs either. Some of the stuff that is severe loop wise, and you can hear like blatant cuts, like Rue the Whirl is a good example of, I'm less interested in that makes me a little bit insane when I can hear things like on short loops. I'm just like,
where it's like do. You hear the little like hiccup.
Short loops with blatant cuts in them. Like that's just one of those things that just goes like, makes me really irritated.
Sure.
So any of the stuff that is like that, like Telephastic Workshop, like, it's interesting, but there is a lot of edits in that. So I think the tracks where they do more editing and loop creation and more cycles, that type of stuff I don't tend to connect to as much. Aquarius is a little weird because it gets a little funky. Like, it kind of takes a step a little too far into, like, I don't know if it's electric piano or whatever it is, but it's got like almost like a wah-wah effect on it or something. So they kind of, when they step out of that zone we talked about earlier of these, more of that syncopated rhythm with these interesting melodies over top that are seemingly, a little bit hooky, but also a little random. When they step outside of that box and either get too funky or too repetitive, when they experiment with vocals, like, those are the times where I'm a little less interested.
Yeah, I think the thing you mentioned with Rue the World, it's that little glitch, and I tend not to like. I don't like electronic music that gets glitchy. Like, I can only take so much, like, Aphex Twin. I have to, like, find the more ambient stuff of Aphex Twin, and that's why I've tried listening to, say, Mouse on Mars and Autechre and some other stuff, and I just, like, if it's too glitchy, I can't relax when I'm listening to it.
Right.
Like, it's like like you said, it's like a sort of a subconscious thing where it, like, kind of gets under my skin, and I can't not focus on it because I'm getting annoyed by where these, like, weird uneven parts are coming in. And to me, there's a natural, like, flow that my brain wants to happen when I hear electronic music. And when you start throwing in, like, where the time is getting cut weird and it's not flowing, then I'm starting to, like, not get it.
Yep.
So, yeah. So this record comes out in 98. Sorry. Came out in 1998. It did get in the top 200 in the UK. That was the only place it charted. I don't think that this... other than, like, music soundtracks, this is not going to do anything in the United States in 1998 as far as from, like, a commercial standpoint.
Right, no.
I cannot imagine that. Now, I mean, from I guess you'd say, like, a musician point of view, I could see where people who were into, like, I was into Massive Attack and Portishead and Tricky and stuff in the 90s. If somebody had pointed me in this direction, I probably would have been into this because I like those bands. and this is just a slight turn from those bands. So I'm sure there were people who found it that way who were more tuned in. But it's a hard sell for any sort of mainstream outlet to pick up on.
Sure.
So let's talk about overall ratings then. Worthy album, worthy 18-track album, better EP, or decent single?
I'm at an EP. What would be on my EP? An Eagle in Your Mind.
Yep.
Turquoise Hexagon Sun. Roy G. Biv. I like the two little... I guess they're not... They're around 2 minutes. There's two... The Kane Industries and Bokuma. They're before that almost... I guess I could include those as like my favorite interludes on the record. What else?
I like the Olsen interlude.
Yeah.
It kind of has a failure interlude sound.
Yeah.
Like would it be on their record?
I think Open the Light. Maybe Pete Standing Alone. But I think that's probably a 40-minute-ish, 30 to 40-minute EP that I think I would enjoy quite a bit.
I'm with you. I think I might add maybe Open the Light. Did you have that one?
Yeah. That has the beginning of that song sounds exactly like Stranger Things. Like I'm like, oh wow, was this on the soundtrack?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, with that like yeah. I don't mind the last track, Happy Cycling. So
what's going on with one very important thought? It's talking about government censorship, and if you're on a panel or if you're a juror in a government censorship trial, you should think about it because it could censor music like this. And I'm like, you don't have any lyrics in your music. Who would censor this?
Well, I'm guessing that they must have sampled that from something.
Oh, okay.
Or, you know what I mean? Like that's weird because it's two guys in the band. So unless they had somebody record that for them, but it doesn't say where. Like I'm looking at the Wikipedia and it doesn't like attribute that. I'm sure there's a page somewhere that tells you where like any samples that they use.
Yeah. It's just a weird, even if it's a sample, it's just a weird sample to have on this record because I'm like, wait a minute, is there something controversial on this record? Like, they don't say anything. Who would ever censor this? This would be like the last record censored.
That's true.
So I'm maybe like, do they say stuff on their other records and not on this one, or what exactly? Why is this? It's just odd.
I'm looking on. None of the. I was checking out the Discogs page because sometimes on Discogs, depending on which release you look at, it'll list if there are samples that are credited to another artist, or they'll list if there's like a guest or something. But there's interesting. The US version has 18 songs. Happy Cycling is a bonus track in the US.
Okay.
It's not on the original version.
I thought it was a bit of it seemed like one important thing should have ended the record. That was my...
Yeah, I guess so.
I
don't know why you did a bonus track, but...
Right.
Whatever. So... Where is it? Yeah, if you want to get an original vinyl press of this, it's like $50 to track this down.
Wow.
And they did reissue it at some point.
Is the album cover? Did you see anything? Is there anything significant about the album cover?
It's just a picture of their family from when they were kids. but with the faces taken off.
Right.
Which gives it a very creepy vibe.
It does.
I'm with you. I'm at more of an EP. Probably like a 6 or 7 song EP. Most of the tracks that you mentioned, I'm good with. And yeah, it's a cool record. I don't know that I love every part of it, and I think I'll definitely like pull a bunch of the instrumentals that we talked about and put them into I have a massive instrumental playlist for just such occasions when I want to just listen to some instrumental music. So they'll be going in there. If you want to, you can find me over on Spotify, and I have a instrumental playlist. It's called the Instrumental Mega Mix. You want to guess how many songs are in there, Jay?
Well, it's a mega mix. I mean, there has to be... How many is a mega?
2,425 songs.
Oh, okay. Mega's a 2,000 or 1,000?
I don't know. But it's 211 hours of music. So if you needed...
This is a long quarantine, so...
Yeah. Well, that's true. But I also have an ambient mega mix. That only has 345 songs. All my mixes are called mega mixes.
I see that.
Because I have a garage, glam, pop punk, power pop mega mix. I have a jazz funk soul mega mix. Mega mix. A new wave mega mix. Hip hop mega mix. I'm surprised at how many people follow some of my mixes.
Yeah.
I'm not an important person. My new wave mega mix has 617 followers. Who are these people? How'd they find it? I don't even understand. I don't understand. So, anyway, I have a Sean Smith mega mix too. Now that all his music's up there.
Of course you do. And I guess I didn't even know that downtempo was a subgenre.
Oh, yes, sir.
And I'm looking at, like, I guess I kind of likes, I mean, if I like electronic music, it's probably downtempo. Like, looking at some of the other artists in this.
Jay, that's the music I make. I make downtempo.
Oh, okay.
More ambient, but the last album had some downtempo. Yeah, if you're into, the stuff that I mentioned with regards to Massive Attack and Portishead, obviously that's more lyrical driven. But I think some DJ Shadow I would consider downtempo, not everything. Would be some other downtempo stuff.
I'm looking at the Essentials downtempo playlist from Apple, and it's Portishead, Air.
Air, yeah, it's a good one.
Moby, DJ Shadow, Massive Attack, Groove Armada.
Mm-hmm.
Now there's one on here that threw me. Where'd it go? Erykah Badu?
I don't know. I don't know enough about Erykah Badu to... I mean, she might do some in that style.
Fila Brasilia, Radiohead.
See Feel is another one that I've heard. That's in that category, and a lot of these bands are influenced by folks like Eno and Kraftwerk and like I mentioned, Aphex Twin, and they also even like Wendy Carlos and some of that like Hooked on Bach, like that Mike Oldfield, like that stuff from the 70s and 80s.
I see.
So, we need to thank our patrons for suggesting this record. We need to thank Paul Custos, who made the suggestion. You can be like Paul. You can go to our website, digmeoutpodcast.com, and you can suggest a record. We have a suggest a record link. You pop it in there. You tell us why you're suggesting the record. Boom. It gets added into a poll. You can also, while you're there, sign up for our box newsletter. It comes out once a week. We keep track of all records relevant to the 90s.
And the 80s.
and the 80s, because we do an 80s podcast every other month. And we also throw some reviews up there. We just did recently, this past week, Vast Robot Armies, which, if you're not aware, is a band that's been around for a while, but Kelly Scott has joined on drums, and the album was produced. Kelly Scott, of course, a failure. And then the album was produced by Jordan Zadarozny of Blinker the Star. So, it's not always going to be, this is the new Offspring record. It might be some things that are tangentially connected to the 80s and 90s that we cover.
Yeah, I was, and this has been a discovery opportunity for us as well. Each week I'm finding stuff that I would have never known about. So Godzillionaire. I didn't know Mark Hennessy from Paw had another band, and they put out a new record, and it's produced by the guy from Shiner, and it's pretty interesting. Like, it's not Paw, but it's definitely got that little bit of a weird I don't know any other way to say it, but like it takes some turns here and there in the same way that Paw does, where you're like, I didn't expect that. But one of many records that's come out this year that I probably wouldn't have known about had I not been trying to track all these down.
Yep. We've got records or reviews up there, not just for Vast Robot Armies, but recent releases by Pearl Jam, Windy and Carl, speaking of ambient and electronic, although that's not an electronic band, they're all analog guitar and bass in that ambient band. Other releases recently, the Boomtown Rats and Noel Gallagher's High Flying Birds EP from them this year, and Baby Chaos, another band that people might not remember.
Like, who knew Baby Chaos was putting out new records?
Yeah. And I'm sure, we've got new records coming up from a lot of bands. Yeah. Local H, Ultimate Fake Book,
Sparta,
Soul Asylum, Danzig Sings Elvis,
The Vapors.
Yep.
And the single I heard is actually really good. Like, I was super excited. I want to hear what this sounds like, and they haven't done anything in a long time.
Mm-hmm. I did just hear, though, that Throwing Muses pushed theirs back to the fall, which I think you're probably going to see artists that don't need to put it out right now, and might have had a tour ready to go. There's a good chance they're going to be pushing them back.
Definitely, if they were planning a tour, I could see that happening.
Yeah, well, I think also because printing plants are shut down.
Oh, that's true.
So it's not like you can have your records printed. I mean, we found that out with I don't know if you've been paying attention to Ken Andrews' YouTube page, but he put up a new post and he said that they were going to do a box set of the first 3 records, all 3 remastered, because the Comfort re-release that came out years ago was not mastered correctly, and they cut off part of a song. So he wanted to do it correctly, so they're doing all 3 in a box set, and they can't get the box set produced because the company that they were going to use, press it, is closed.
Right. Wow.
So I'm sure a lot of artists are dealing with that right now.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about that. That's, well, not only the production, but maybe not shipping, but the record stores aren't open, so who are you shipping them to? I guess.
Yeah, direct to the people. Well, Amazon said that they're not making that a priority right now.
Yeah.
Books and CDs or books and records or whatever, entertainment stuff is not a high shipping priority for them. Right. So unless you're buying it directly from the artist and having it shipped to your house, you're probably having a hard time tracking that stuff down. So while you're at home, why don't you write up a review over at Apple Podcasts for us?
There you go.
How about that segue? And leave us some positive feedback if you wouldn't mind. We greatly appreciate it. So for Jay, I'm Tim. We're out, and we'll be back next week with another episode